Hello, everyone. My name is Stone Washington. I am a practicum fellow with the Pierce Center for Professional Communications and a second year PhD student in the policy studies here at a program here at Clemson University. And today I'm going to give you a brief lecture and discussion on directional tips for new writers. Now, basically, thinking about big picture, what comes to mind with rhetorical writing? Basically, rhetorical writing is the art of understanding all of the elements of appealing to one's audience in the writing process. It's basically understanding the building blocks that undergird the writing process and kind of basically pits the writer to form a relationship with his readers or his audience, his or her readers or audience, basically. But thinking the big picture with rhetorical writing, many students often make the mistake of writing academic papers without first even thinking about who their audience is or who their target audience or group of people that they're writing to are. And they also make the mistake of not thinking of what their original purpose for writing is. So like what is the why in what you're writing, or what kind of inspired you to write on this given issue in the first place? Many people often just start in the middle of the road and decide to just write on a given topic without first thinking about what inspirations, what notions that you already had built within your thinking kind of led you to want to write about this issue. But basically, in order to best appeal to one's intended audience or to write in a purposeful manner, students have to think rhetorically. You have to think about basically all the elements that go into the writing process. Who is my intended audience? What specific style of writing will I take, or what genre will I adopt? Basically, also thinking of what is the context of my writing, or what specific external factors impact my writing? What is the timeliness of my writing, or how my writing fits within the specific time period that I'm writing on? These are just some of the factors that I'm going to go into further detail, but should be at the top of a writer's mind when they're starting the writing process. And basically, your audience and those who read your written work should not be confused about what your paper is seeking to explain. So confusion is one of the biggest pitfalls that every writer should avoid. They should make sure that their readers are always well informed about what they're writing on and shouldn't have any questions or concerns about certain aspects of their writing. And so to that end, the best papers are those that are self-explanatory, or basically they can explain themselves in a way that readers can reasonably understand what the author is seeking to convey to them. But basically focusing on rhetorical context. So this is what I was kind of mentioning briefly in the previous slide. Writing rhetorically allows you to more deeply engage with the reader, or with your set of readers that you're basically appealing your work to. And there are essential elements that every new writer must focus on whenever they're starting their work. One of the first elements you need to think about is genre. Basically, what style or format of writing is most appropriate for you to convey your message to your set of readers. And genre, I like to understand these as basically reoccurring types of writing that are identifiable by distinctive features in the structure and the style or the document design of what you're doing. And so an example of various forms of genre that you've basically probably encountered in your daily lives that can include personal writing, like a letter or a diary or a journal entry or even a blog post. Another type of genre is professional workplace writing, which includes resume drafting, cover letters, brochures, or a management report. And then there's also pop culture writing, like a newspaper or a comic book or a greeting card. So there are a lot of different forms of genre, and it's basically up to the writer to basically select whichever form or style of writing best appeals to his or hers intended audience, or or basically what's the best way of conveying what you want to write to your intended audience. That's the type of genre that you have to kind of select. The target audience is the who you're writing to. The who am I writing to. And basically, when you think about your target audience, you have to think about what do they already know about the subject matter of the writing, and why would they care to learn about your contribution to the subject matter. So it's always thinking about, a good writer always thinks about kind of what the audience most likely knows about what they're writing of in advance, and kind of why would they care to see what you have to say, or what new element that your writing offers to the given subject matter. So always kind of thinking about this ahead of time is important. The next element is the purpose. So purpose is the why. Why am I writing in the first place? This always deals with the core element of your issue. So whatever issue is basically at the core of your paper, that's going to kind of guide your purpose in writing. So always thinking about like if you're writing about something that pertains to you personally, some kind of specific issue that might deal with your own core beliefs or your family's beliefs, or something that impacts your cultural understanding, kind of basically explaining that in your paper and kind of tying that into the overall reason for why you're writing is very key. And just always keeping that in mind, like before you even have to write something, you should always know, what is the purpose of why I'm writing, or what is driving me to write? What is inspiring me to put pen to paper, or put text to document, in terms of kind of what you want to write to your audience. So always thinking about the purpose is very key. The context justifies the circumstances for writing on the subject matter. So thinking about what are the external factors that are out there that exist that influence my specific chosen subject matter. So there are always going to be things that exist outside of the scope of your paper that are going to influence you writing on that given issue in the first place. So just think of like anything that might be influencing kind of the issue that you're writing on, or any external factors that might be influencing your own thought process, or governing your own specific place in school, or in your own your home, or some kind of private environment that are kind of just basically pushing you to write on this given subject. Thinking about the context, all these external factors that are kind of pushing and pulling you to write on this subject in the first place. That's basically what goes into context. And lastly, timeliness. So timeliness is basically thinking about, why are you writing on this given subject or topic at this present time. So there has to be a reason for why you're writing on this for this given time. So is it because you're writing this for a class assignment, or for some kind of midterm essay, or you're writing on this in your own personal capacity because you work in some kind of club or doing some kind of volunteer drive? And even within the context of why you're writing, think about why, whatever connection that you have to the organization or to your school, why might they be getting you to write on this given subject in the first place? So always thinking about if there's like a time element in your writing. So there has to be some reason to why you're writing on this subject at this given time. But moving on to structural writing tips, basically that deal with the introduction paragraph in your paper. So these are going to kind of give you some basic tips for essay writing. So when you're writing an essay and you're dealing with the introduction, make sure that you first start off with a strong paper title that really effectively engages the subject. So always have a title in your paper that grabs the reader's attention and gets them to be kind of thinking more deeply about what you're going to be writing on, and basically kind of captures their attention about some core idea or element in your paper. And then basically your introduction paragraph must explain what problem your paper will ultimately address or attempt to solve. So always make sure you kind of state your overarching problem, or the theme that's going to be driving the scope of your paper. And an effective intro, it always has to offer one's personal perspective on the subject matter. So if you're writing a paper that's where you're allowed to interject your own personal opinion, and it doesn't have to be unbiased, make sure that you always centrally state what your own position is on the paper, and always compare and contrast how that might conflict with other established thinking on the paper. So you might be writing something in response to what's already been written on in the first place, always kind of situate your own personal perspective in comparison to other authors who have written on the subject that you're writing on. Because most of the time, you're not going to be the first person writing on this subject. It's always going to be an established body of scholarship. So it's always important to think about that. And basically, you always have to provide the necessary background information to provide relevance on the cover topic. So intro should kind of just set the background, set the precedent for what you're going to be writing on. An introduction should always center around a thesis statement. So that's the core to what you're writing on, is the thesis statement, your overall argument that justifies the primary purpose for your paper. So thesis statement is usually like a short sentence that kind of describes what your overall argument is and what you're going to be driving in the paper throughout the rest of the paper. And so the structure, just some tips about the body and conclusion. So remember to begin each body paragraph with the topic sentence. So a topic sentence that starts each paragraph should basically connect to some aspect of your thesis statement. So your thesis statement, you can provide the statement, but the topic sentences that go at the beginning of your body paragraphs, that should derive from sentences that are surrounding your thesis statement. So those sentences that kind of describe different aspects of your thesis statement or of your argument, that should be kind of broadcasted later on in each of your body paragraphs. So each body paragraph should start with that topic sentence that kind of guides the scope for the focus of that paragraph. It makes sure to make sure that every body paragraph kind of focuses on some new element or some core aspect of your thesis that isn't talked about in other parts of your paper. And you should basically kind of use 3 to 4 body paragraphs overall. Body paragraphs should operate symbiotically. So they're not like, they don't exist within an island in and of itself, but they are connected, they're interconnected with one another. So every prior body paragraph should set the stage and connect to what's going to be talking about in your subsequent body paragraph. So it's kind of like a interconnected system where you talk about a separate issue governing the thesis, but towards the end of every body paragraph, you kind of segue into what's going to be discussed for your next body paragraph. So you kind of have to have those transitional sentences that are stated at the end of each body paragraph to set the stage for what you're going to be talking about for the next paragraph. But basically the conclusion, and then moving on to the conclusion has to summarize the purpose of the paper. So I think of conclusions as kind of a restatement of what you mentioned in the introduction paragraph, but not just constrained to a restatement, but also talk about what your principal findings were, what your overall takeaways were, and did you discover anything new? Did you contribute anything to the existing literature? What should your readers kind of go away with in terms of what they ultimately learned? And this is just kind of a way for you to kind of rehash what you stated in the introduction, but also define what you ultimately want your readers to go away with in terms of learning something new from your work. So conclusions are very important to that regard. And with that, those are my quick directional tips for new writers. Thank you so much for listening and have a wonderful day.